Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishna Project podcast. This is episode number 187. Yes, we have made it to our 187th episode. We're still broadcasting after 4.5 years. And number 187 means we are just 13. Let's hope it's lucky today for us. We're just 13 episodes away from our 200th episode. This was the podcast, as you all know by now, because I bang on about it, that I was meant to do 10 episodes of and then get on with something else. But we're still going after 187 episodes. Okay, and I'm grateful actually to our ever-growing global audience who tunes in every week to listen to our fantastic range of guests. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button so you can be kept updated about future podcasts and video productions from the Hare Krishna Project. Or if you're watching this on Facebook and you haven't already, please like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page so you can be kept updated that way as well. As you probably know by now, as well as these podcasts, which are fantastic, we also do other things at the Hare Krishna Project. We distribute books, we do school programs, Hare Krishna festivals, and a whole range of fantastic, I was saying preaching, that sounds very religious. Preaching activities, religious things. Who would have thought it? Okay, one of the things I love about hosting this podcast is I get to virtually travel all over the world to countries I've never been to. And I still, at the age of 41, just revealed my age, at the age of 41, I still haven't made it to the United States of America. You know, that country that us Brits have got a special relationship with. Not really quite sure why, um, as lovely as it is. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest this week, all the way from the United States of America. It's Madhurya Lila Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Um,
Madhurya,
and
it's great to
you
have you
start.
with us. Great to have you with us. You and I have been uh, in contact for some time, um, but it's only recently we realised we've actually got quite a bit in common, which will be revealed later on.
Unless
And
it's in the thumbnail description.
yeah, and I've been quite keen for a while to interview you because, in one sense, you're quite unique. I mean, we're all unique, we're all special, but you're quite unique in a particular way. So, Madhurya, I'm going to start with the first question. It's the first question every guest gets, just to warm them up, because I know it's early in the morning where you are. So you've got up extra early today. Thank you for that. So, Madhurya, please tell us a little bit about you and where you are from.
Um, well, let's see. I am, oh dear, that is a very vague question. I live in Iowa. I was born in Iowa, but I was born in a small town. I live in a city now. And in between, I lived in a couple of other Midwestern states that started with I. I am a pastor's kid and the child of a Christian educator. And I am also a Christian educator by trade and a certified lay minister in the United Methodist Church. And yeah, and I'm
Wow.
also here.
Yeah. Wow. Do you know what? You know how your mind goes off on these tangents? I was just thinking of all the states beginning with I then when you mentioned I.
I've been in 3 out of the 4 of them.
We're not gonna have a competition now. It's like I was gonna go on to politics then. Okay, so what was it like growing up as a pastor's kid? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it was tricky because I was I was a small town pastor's kid, and then I was in a medium-sized suburb of a large city as the child of a full-time Christian educator, which is almost the same deal. but it was different parents doing the work. So like I had one parent in active ministry for the first 16 years of my
Mm.
life. And really the first 6 years of that, my mother was a full-time pastor's wife, which especially in small towns and small churches is basically just an unpaid full-time ministry position. Um, and it was difficult because I'm also an ADHDer, an autistic ADHDer, and so like I was having meltdowns, but that was also a threat to my parents' jobs. And so there was always like kind of this tension between like the social niceties and like the truth of what happens. And I was both of my parents were hurt by church politics, by issues with like my father ended up in a church that had been a blended congregation. And then when they discovered that there was a young pastor with two small children in charge of the church and his wife was really great with the kids, everybody who didn't have a church came to church so that their kids would have socialization opportunities. So there were three distinct groups in the church, and that ended up driving him out of ministry because, of course, everybody wanted to do things their way. And he did not have the social acumen to handle that situation. So that drove him out of full-time ministry. But by then, my mother had figured out that she was really, really interested in how children worship and how that can be different from the worship of adults, and also how it's the same, and also how faith develops over time and how that is different depending on when the starting point is and what nurtures faith versus um what reproduces dogma, and how those are different but can also interact with each other. And so they met in seminary back in the late 60s, early 70s. She was one of seven women on campus, and she kept getting asked, so are you here to marry a pastor or are you here to be a pastor? And she's like, I'm just here because I want to study theology because I love God, but I don't want to be a pastor. That's like a lot of work. So then she ended up being a full-time Christian educator, which of course meant we had to move to some place with a big enough church to hire a full-time Christian educator. So then it was the 80s in the Chicago suburbs for me you know.
So when you say, because a lot of our audience will be followers of the Hare Krishna tradition,
Mhm.
or nothing, or something
Yeah.
else, and one of those terms you use, then I just want to kind of maybe explore what it means. I think you used the word that your parents met at seminary.
Seminary. Seminary, which is what the Americans at least call a religious graduate school.
It's kind of like Bible college, maybe
Um,
theological college.
Bible college is a term that is used it's used more in the capital E evangelical
Hmm. Hmm.
sphere, and it's usually that's the only post-secondary education, like you graduate from high school, which I don't remember what they call it in Britain, but like it's the basic that everybody gets, and then you're like 17, 18, you graduate, and then in the capital evangelical world, you would go to a Bible college, which you might only go to for 1 year, but you'd go there for like 1 to 4 years, and you'd be training to be a pastor or a missionary, or you'd be like studying um, how to make uh, theological films or something, though sometimes I would call them barely theological, how to make Bible themed films. Um, and or you'd be studying to be a pastor's wife or a missionary's wife and looking for a husband, um, so like the Bible college term can mean, and some of the
Yeah.
Bible colleges are just completely unaccredited. Like all they're studying is the Bible. Um, there is one that is accredited that's in Chicago that I knew about growing up. Um, but like with them, you'll just take a class and the class is just John and it's all about the Gospel of John and it's just the Gospel of John, but it's not particularly rigorously academic or anything.
Mm, mm,
In the seminary, you tend to get things more like uh you get classes more about like theological thought throughout the ages and like concepts of grace and it's a little broader and it tends to be more grounded in academics.
mm.
So like and my father and mother were Presbyterians. My mother had grown up Methodist and ended up working in a Methodist church, but she was she had converted to be a Presbyterian, and my father was a Presbyterian, and Presbyterians require their pastors to learn ancient Greek and Hebrew, and like because they have to be able to read the original words and translate it. And
Mm.
in Methodists are kind of like, if you find someone who knows ancient Hebrew, they can tell you what it means. But do actually ask somebody what it means because there's a lot of good stuff in there, but we're not going to make you learn the language. Um, so yeah, it was pretty rigorous academically. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned Presbyterian because that was going to be my next follow-up question as to I was going to well I mean I know because you've told me a bit before
Mhm.
but an assumption could be made that if your mother went to a seminary in the 60s and 70s and they were then with a woman talking about ordination, therefore an assumption could be made it's a more liberal denomination. Liberal means different things to different people. So I knew that you weren't raised Catholic.
Mhm.
I knew you weren't raised kind of evangelical, conservative evangelical. It had to be one of the more, what's the technical term? Non-conformist Protestant churches. And I think
Yes.
Presbyterians are non-conformist Protestant.
Presbyterians are proudly as nonconformist as you get. Like,
Yeah.
Methodists are kind of like, well, yeah, we're nonconformist by default, I guess, but like, really, we wanted to be part of the Anglican Church. The Anglicans just kind of didn't want us, you
Mm.
know, whereas the Presbyterians are like, hey, we are nonconformist. You're asking
Yeah.
who's nonconformist? We're raising our hands really high,
Yeah.
both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because I'm a typical bloke and I put stuff in boxes in my head, anyone like me who's listening or watching, and a lot of our audience is UK based, generally the non-conformist Protestant churches are generally, but not always, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Baptists. I probably put the Quakers in there as well, the Salvation Army, the United Reformed Church, the Congregationalist Church. There's probably a few others that are the Moravians. Can't forget the Moravians. We've got a Moravian church near where I
Have
live,
to remember
actually.
the Moravians. We're
Yeah,
Methodists. We can't
they're
forget the
very
Moravians.
small in Britain, the Moravians. I
Yeah.
mean, I only discovered them 2 years ago, and I thought I knew everything.
Well,
Like,
they'd be huge if it weren't for John Wesley. It's just that, he went and started his own movement. And so everybody who would have
yeah,
been attracted to the Moravians ended up Methodists. So, yeah.
and the biggest of those groups in the UK is the Methodists by far, because
Hmm.
Methodism started in Britain. And I'm from Somerset, and there's still pretty much a Methodist church in every village. You know, diehard Bible teaching.
Hmm.
Well, we will come on to that a bit later on. Okay, we're going to come back to that a bit later on.
Hmm.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Hmm.
Fascinating, brief description of your upbringing. Um, uh, please tell us a bit about how you discovered Krishna consciousness, or how you met the Hare Krishna devotees.
Well, I was after a long history of mental illness and figuring out that there was something else going on. I was diagnosed in 1 year with autism and ADHD and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That's a physical thing, but it's also a congenital condition that progresses, that is genetic, that I am sure ran in my family as well. Um, but so I was like reevaluating my entire life, and I was very, very angry because what I realized as I did that process of deconstructing and reconstructing is that um, I had been telling people what I needed, and they had been deciding I needed something else and doing the opposite of what I needed in a lot of cases. And this was people that I knew cared and wanted to help me, and they just did exactly the wrong thing. And so I was very, very angry about it. And so I was out in virtual space being very angry about it in the late diagnosed autistic groups. And a devotee named, well, they go by Jax on the internet. Uh, but they found me in one of the, actually, I think we were in two groups at the same time for a while. And we kept commenting on the same posts. And then sometimes, like, one of us would reply to the other one. And they said they kept thinking, this person is not safe. She is so angry. She is not safe. But then they kept like feeling this nudge, like, no, no, you need to talk to this person. Talk to this person. Like, so eventually we started chatting, doing the direct messaging thing, because one thing that came out was that we both had deep interests in theistic spirituality and were open to talking to people who did not have the exact same set of stories and scriptures that we did. And that's very rare in autistic spaces. We have there are a lot of autistic people with a good degree of religious trauma. And so you kind of try to be careful about it. When you so like we couldn't really speak about it openly in the Facebook group because we would be triggering people. And then sometimes you'll have an autistic person who just has learned that this narrow religious view is the only way, and then they like can't tolerate discussion with anyone else because we tend toward rigidity, especially if we have trauma going on. And so like if their only safe space has been this narrow religious tradition, they're not going to move from that at all, and it's not productive. So we're like, yay, I now have somebody that I can sit with for 6 hours on Zoom and discuss how the imagery in the first half of the book of the Revelation compares with Vedic imagery, and it's great. So yeah, and then after a while, it got to the point where I was looking forward to those multi-hour Sunday afternoon chats so much that I was like complaining that my friend was going to book groups that were run by other people in their mission, because I had to wait until the book group was over before I could have my, like I wanted my Harikata, and so then I started getting invited to the book groups so that I wouldn't have to wait. And for a while, I actually got triggered by some of the writings because they were being read by older women, and it was very repetitive, and it felt like a demand. It was I don't remember what we were reading. Something Srila Maharaj had written, but it was very much, this is the only thing you need to do and you can't do it, but it's the only thing you need to do, but you can't do it. And so like I was just like, I couldn't take that from older women. Like I ended up having to watch videos of him so that I could hear it in his voice, in order to really hear, because the delivery method was, but I also did that. Like I'm like, I need this so much. And that was during COVID. So like my church wasn't doing very much then. And I was just desperate. I just needed to talk to somebody. Like I needed more God talk than I was getting. And I didn't care what shape or color the God was. Like I'm like anyone I can recognize, any truth I can recognize, I want to talk about it.
Quite literally. Love that. You didn't care what color God was or is. Quite literally.
I mean, I don't get to say like that. That
Yeah.
one's not up to me.
This was
I don't even get to tell my husband whether he has a beard or not. Who am I to tell God what color he shows up as? Like,
so this was a book group that you joined during the COVID pandemic lockdown, and it was run by I think by the signs of it, devotees from the Sri Chaitanya Sarasvat Math.
Yeah.
Great. And just so everyone is aware, I interviewed Jax about 2 years ago on this podcast. Can't believe it was 2 years ago. Fascinating conversation. If you're you can search for it in the playlist. Okay, great. Sorry, I cut you off. And that sounds fascinating. The kind of the comparisons between the Book of Revelation and Vedic imagery that you were having with Jax, and then having these in-depth conversations in the book group in the Sri Chaitanya Sarasvat Math. Tell us a bit about then how your relationship with Krishna consciousness kind of deepened then after that.
I mean, this is difficult. It just happened. uh, I mean, I had had to freeze my faith development as a late teen because I was getting to the point where I needed to understand myself more. And I didn't know I was autistic yet. So it was kind of difficult to understand myself well enough for progression. So I'd run for a few decades on belief rather than faith. And, but the beliefs I were teaching were very inclusive because I'd had issues that had sent me really deep when I was a teenager that had led me to already find harmony for the idea that, okay, maybe I'll back up and go at this from a completely different angle, and like talk about definitions. So the conception I have is that the ultimate consciousness, which I call God out of habit, reveals God's self to the souls in this world at different times and places in culturally appropriate ways, in ways that make sense with the semiotics of that people group in that environment. And then what follows that revelation is a process of co-creation where the humans to whom God reveals God's self and God work together to build up a set of practices and teachings designed to nurture souls from a point of separation to a point of union. If that makes sense. So like I already kind of
me, yeah.
I already had like kind of that conception, and I'd already like found some scriptural references that that supported or hinted at that in the Bible. So I kind of thought, and I knew because I had dealt with dirty church politics and I had looked into you know looked at the history of the Christian church with all of the splits and mergers and splits and murders and splits, and I understood that once a religion is established, people are going to do what people do, which is forget things and lose track of things and twist good things to support their power, and so things would degrade over time and things would split, and then new bits would be revealed or would be revitalized. Like God would be coming in occasionally to do that revitalization. There would be a revival or an inspiration or something, but that of course would also then cause a split because not everybody would go with the new thing, and so like I knew that meant that there were probably paths of I'm going to revert to Christian language here, so you may need to come back and ask me to explain something, but I'm going to basically say that the path to salvation could be found in any tradition, but it wouldn't be found necessarily in every line of every tradition. That you'd have to look for the line that had enough of enough of the true religion preserved or restored, but that like any of the broader traditions could have one or more of those lines. So I was sort of kind of keeping an eye out to see if I could ever find one of those lines in a non-Christian tradition, because I'm like, there probably are. And so then as I started, studying with the devotees, after a while, it's like, oh, I found one. I found one, it was kind of exciting. It was a surprise and not a surprise. And then I'm like, okay, well, is this a situation where I'm supposed to convert? And the answer I got was no, but I was asking the wrong question, because what I should have said was, are you going to take over my life from now on and make me do twice as much work? And the answer to that was yes. Which is a wonderful answer, by the way, but at the time that I first asked the question, I would not have liked that answer at all. So then the first thing that happened when I started like really getting excited about finding Krishna consciousness was that I dove deeper into the Methodist tradition, and I went to the School for Lay Ministries, which people had been telling me for a while was a logical next step for me. But I was just like, nope, like people tried to get me to go to go to seminary when I was in college, and I said no, because I had seen what being in the ministry had done to my parents and how stressful that was, and I couldn't deal with that stress. And so, nope, not going to School for Lay Ministry, because I know they use that as a recruitment ground to try to get you to be a licensed local pastor, and then they try to get you on the path of study to be a deacon. And no, I'm not doing that. And so then I was doing that. And because it was COVID, instead of they had to go to an online format, which meant that I was like one of the first people to complete all 12 of the courses in just a little over a year. It used to be a 3-year process. And so then I like whipped through it in record time. And got my certified lay servant certification early on in that process. And then now I've worked my way up to certified lay minister, which basically means that the district commission on ministries oversees my work, but they can't tell me what to do, which is, kind of the way I like it. They can't assign me to a congregation because I'm not clergy, so I don't have to do what they say. But they do interview me regularly, and they get this is a miracle. Like, it's not just my local church where they like knew me personally, that they've been kind of excited about my dialogue with the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. They're the district commission on ministries, that like the head of the committee is like ecstatic. He's like, this is so cool. So like he interviewed me once, and then the second time they interviewed me, he brought in somebody who was doing dialogue with a Buddhist because he thought that we might understand each other's terms better than he did. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, but you're a Bonhoeffer guy, and it was by reading Bonhoeffer and Srila Sridhar Maharaj together that I was finally able to do things that I'd known I needed to do as a Christian, but I couldn't do it. And then I was able to do it, like and it kept getting to a situation where like I'd be reading The Cost of Discipleship and I'd get stuck. and I'd have no idea what that thing I just read meant. So then I'd switch over, and I don't remember which book we were reading at the time, but I'd switch over to reading Srila Maharaj, and that would explain what Bonhoeffer had just been saying. And then I'd read in that until I got stuck, and then I'd switch back to Bonhoeffer, and then Bonhoeffer would explain it. So I'm like, it's like, you understand, you just don't know the Sanskrit. There's a difference, like, yeah.
Believe it or not, you've kind of already answered the next question. It's I know I love how it's almost like you've predicted what I'm going to ask or whatever. But one of the, and I think I alluded to this at the beginning of the conversation. One of the things that fascinates me about you is that you are a lay minister in the Methodist Church, as well as a follower of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Krishna consciousness. Can you tell us a bit about, and you kind of have already, but you tell us maybe a bit more about what your role is or what it means to be a lay minister in the Methodist Church?
It means that I am recognized as having a call to ministry, but it's a call to a particular area of service, as opposed to a call to whatever service is needed by the organization of the church. Because rituals and forms sometimes help people understand where the lines are drawn. I'll go through. I cannot do baptisms or serve communion. Those are reserved for the elders and for deacons and licensed local pastors practicing under the supervision of an elder. So that's clergy work. So that's what I can't do. The state says that I cannot do weddings, but in the Methodist Church, people marry each other and the church officiates. So as far as the Methodist Church is concerned, if I went out and got myself a Justice of the Peace certification, I could do weddings. I can definitely do funerals, memorials, celebrations of life, whatever recognition of somebody going home, however a family wants to phrase that. I can do all the parts of that. My area of ministry, as I state it, is inclusive Christianity. So that includes interfaith dialogue, which is very convenient. It also includes neurodivergent inclusivity, disability inclusivity, racial inclusivity, gender issues, inclusivity of different ages and generations, and LGBTQ issues, and like it's kind of just like how is I said it succinctly once. Let me see if I can do it again. Who is a follower of Christ in a global multicultural world is basically the question that inclusive Christianity tries to answer, is how are we love in this world? How do we let that pass through us in a way that is clear, that we're not interfering too much with that message?
So you have a real passion, a real desire, a real heart for including people.
Yes.
You want to include as many people as possible because God loves everybody.
Yes, basically, yeah. I mean, and that is in line with the Methodist tradition.
Yes.
What
And just it's funny. It's all kind of coming back to me now. I mean, I not that I've forgotten. I'm not that my memory's not that bad. But the reason that Madhurya got in touch with me at least a month and a half ago was that you discovered through someone else, Jax, a mutual friend, that I'm writing a book called Inclusive Krishna. And then you got in touch to say, hey, I'm doing a lot of whole
Hey, I'm
stuff
doing the
on
Christian version of
yeah,
that.
and so that's how this dialogue has happened and how we've got to where we are today. And I would say that's kind of the remit of our focus at the Hare Krishna Project, inclusive Vaishnavism, inclusive Krishna, is we want to include people,
Well,
because
yeah.
so, because the Bhagavad Gita tells us that Krishna exists
Hmm.
in the hearts of all in his paramount form.
Hmm.
And the Christian comparison would be the Holy Spirit. God exists in all living
Hmm.
entities. So we really, really try not to discriminate, and we don't. Yeah, I mean, and so and also you've mentioned the Methodist Church again, which we're going to keep coming
Hmm.
back to, just so because we've used a lot of terms and words today that people will be unfamiliar with. Generally, the Methodist denomination is seen as quite liberal. So again, I don't words like liberal and conservative aren't actually always helpful, but it's one of
Especially
the
when you're talking across the pond.
yeah, yeah. So generally, the Methodist Church is seen as quite inclusive and it's quite pro-inclusion. So for our
There
British
is a
or
very conservative arm, but I say they just want to be evangelicals and keep the
yeah,
Methodists like they just want to do infant baptism, but other than that, they want to be American
yeah,
evangelicals.
yeah. So the Methodist Church, so a British audience can understand the contextual position of it, is the biggest Christian denomination in Britain that allows same-sex marriage in its churches. So an actual marriage, proper marriage with an actual minister, not just a blessing, an actual marriage.
Mhm.
And it's the biggest denomination in Britain that allows that. The kind of smaller ones, I think the URC and the Quakers do as well. So just if we're using LGBT issues as a benchmark,
Mhm.
which are helpful, I guess, then that's the Methodists are known for that inclusive uh, position. Sorry, I
And
cut
the
you off,
British
but yeah,
Methodists, because they have a special position, because okay, so like the official name of the denomination I'm in is the United Methodist Church, and the British Methodists have a special position because that's where Methodism was born. But the church that became the United Methodist Church actually got set up first in America because John Wesley really wanted to stay part of the Anglican Church.
mm,
And the problem was there was this little thing called the Revolutionary War, um, where or I don't even know if you call it the same thing in Britain. You might call it when those
you mean the
Americans did
Revolutionary
that foolish
War?
thing. Yeah.
Is
The
that
Revolutionary War in the
ah?
1700s. That's why the Methodist Church was established the in the United States because the Anglican Church withdrew all their clergy.
You mean the war that led up to America gaining its independence from the British?
Yes.
Yes, we don't mention that in Britain.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
teasing. I'm
You don't call it
teasing.
anything. Anyway, but yeah.
Ironically, more British people mark and celebrate American Independence Day than the English do St. George's Day. That's
Well,
just
that
a
makes sense. Yeah.
bizarre
Anyway,
side note. Sorry, go ahead.
um, but anyway, so the Anglican Church withdrew their clergy, and John Wesley could not bear to know that there were so many people who were part of his movement in North America who didn't have access to the sacraments. So he sent another elder who was working with him. He was an elder in the Anglican Church. And he sent, maybe it was two elders. Anyway, he sent them over and had them ordain bishops. And this is, if you've been in Christian churches, this is absolutely strange. This is a deliberate break of the disciplic succession because a bishop would outrank an elder. Um, I mean, elder means different things in different denominations, but in the Anglican and Methodist church, the bishop was like a whole other level of clergy. It was deacon and then elder and then bishop. And and actually that's why we don't actually have additional in the Methodist church to this day, we don't have additional like educational and like spiritual like things that we put bishops through. We just give them additional administrative duties because all of the American Methodist bishops have always been just elders, then another elder ordained as a bishop.
Mm,
But they needed to ordain bishops so that they could ordain elders so that the people could have communion. And so that is how the American Methodist Church got started. And that was the one because then America, did its whole like manifest destiny and spreading all over the world and trying to be more British than the British thing, and colonized everybody. And like, so then that it was mostly the American missionary groups. I think most of the British Methodists were doing internal mission rather than in other countries, but the Americans did both, because we always overdo everything. And and so so the British Methodists have always, while they've participated in like the general conferences that the United Methodist Church has every 4 years, they've always gotten to make their own rules. And it wasn't until, so they got to make it possible to do LGBTQ marriages before it was technically allowed in the United States for Methodists to do LGBTQ marriages. We've been having a fight. That was a fight that we were having when I was in youth group in high school, and we've just had a massive denominational split over it. But yeah.
I just want to, before we move on, I'm loving this conversation, and for full disclosure, I was raised a Methodist, so I know a lot of the things you're talking about, and this is why I'm loving talking to you today. But just for context, because a lot of audience be like, what are all these terms? John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist Church, along with his brother Charles Wesley. And also there was a notable third individual, George Whitehead. Was it George Whitehead? I think there was.
It was Whitehead or Whitefield?
Maybe Whitefield.
Whitefield. George Whitefield, though then eventually started supporting slavery, so we try not to talk about him.
We don't talk about him. And this all happened in the 1700s. So around 250 years ago, the Methodist Church was formed or founded, and John Wesley was a British man, and he was a Church of England vicar. And what he wanted to do was to kind of reform the Church of England, go back to basics, back to the Bible, preach out into the communities, particularly with the poor people, with the working classes. But for different reasons, he wasn't able to reform the Church of England. So he and his brother Charles set up the Methodist Church. From memory, it was called the Methodist Church because people saw them as quite methodic with their Christian practice or with their Bhakti. They got up early in the morning. They said their prayers. They were very kind of missionary.
It was originally a term of derision back when they were at Oxford, and they called themselves the Holy Club, and they all had and this was before it was a Methodist movement. This was just I mean, they had some who ended up being Presbyterians. They had some who ended up, they had a Moravian or two in there. Like they had like this whole group of these different Anglicans who were trying to be reformers and also non-conforming Protestants who were meeting at Oxford, and they were like keeping themselves accountable for daily Bible reading and daily walks and daily prayer, and then they would also study together, study scriptures together and study the writings of theologians together and stuff. And so everybody, some of the other people around them they just started calling them, oh, those Methodists, they got a method for everything,
Yes.
So that's how we ended up being Methodists, is because we have a less prescribed sadhana, but to have sadhana is prescribed, if that makes sense.
Yes. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. And the other thing just to point out is also for context, John Wesley and others went to America before it was called the USA to preach, to spread the gospel. So that's what Madhurya was referring to around the Revolutionary War, and American independence was 1776. almost, I think, 250 years next year.
Hmm.
And so that's the kind of contextual time. And any history buffs out there, I'm sad that I am one. It was George III, King George III, who was monarch at the time, who was Queen Victoria's grandfather, who lost us, the colonies. My goodness, we haven't forgiven him since. I'm teasing. Okay, I love.
You don't want the mess that's going on over here right now,
No,
trust me.
no. I remember. Oh, I was going to go off on politics then. There was a whole. No, I won't. I won't.
Okay,
Okay,
bring that squirrel back. We can discuss
but
politics another
okay.
time.
So for some people, and quite a few people listening to this and watching this will think this is really weird. She's practicing Krishna consciousness, or particularly Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and she's also a Methodist minister. Isn't that really weird? I've put on my notes from Methodism to the
Yes,
Maha
and
Mantra,
also no.
which is pretty
Methodism
cool.
Maha Mantra.
Um, Methodism Maha Mantra. Um, do you find that following these traditions causes problems? Are there conflicts, or do they pair together quite well?
Um, they pair very well. Um, I have said, and I've said this to other people who are Methodists who have a passing familiarity with Hare Krishnas or who are practicing Krishna consciousness but have a passing familiarity with Methodists. I've said that I think the two lines have more in common than Methodists have with most Baptists. Um, at least most United Methodists have with most Baptists in America right now. Um, just there's the way that the process of sanctification is recognized, the way that the interaction between faith and action um, is described. Um, I mean, I was flipping through a book of sermons of John Wesley this morning, and I was, scanning through one, and I think he's got all six limbs of surrender in that one sermon. Like it's 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 grouped differently. Um, but it's like if if you took two identical postcards and you cut one horizontally and cut the other one vertically, you would still have two entire postcards when you tried to put them together. It's just that when, you pull out this strip, it's different from this. Like there are no two identical strips, no two identical groupings of concepts, but all of the key ideas and all of the key positions are there, if that makes sense. It's a little bit like looking at a cylinder and
Mm,
either describing it as a circle or a rectangle, depending on what angle you're looking at. But if you look at it from both angles, you can see the whole thing.
mm. Because both are preaching and teaching the same thing, but
Yeah,
broadly,
essentially.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, well, and the term, the true religion of the soul is used in both traditions.
Mm,
Um, and it's described as essentially the soul trying to unite or reunite with God. And it is really a reuniting. There are some Christian denominations where like humans are seen as inherently sinful. So their redemption is not really, there isn't really a re on that redemption. It's like it's like you start off terrible and then God makes you good. Um, but the concept of the image of God that Methodism has gotten, and this comes through the Anglican Church, through the Catholic Church, um, is that we are part and parcel. We are God stuff in a limited form, in some form that is in some way lesser than, somehow flattened or reflected, but still the same stuff. And we're just trying to get back to being what we are made to be. And so like that concept, that basic concept is the same. And the concept that actual religion, the true religion, is always going to be that process of purification and realignment to get home. And that process happens through service, through love. It's purification, it's endurance, it's commitment, regular practice. You do it, you don't feel it all the time, but you do it anyway, because that is how you show love, is by choosing to do love. And that if you love God, you cannot not love others, because God loves others. And what the Lord desires above all is for his servants to be served. And so then you go out and you serve the servants, even if they don't know they're his servants yet. It's very similar.
I mean, for me personally, it was actually the path of Bhakti, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, that made me appreciate Jesus more and understand Jesus more, and really understand what Jesus was actually talking about when he was being challenged by the Pharisees and they were trying to trick him. What is the greatest of the commandments? And Jesus said, the first commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your second greatest commandment is to love everyone, treat everyone as you'd like to be treated. And that is Bhakti yoga. Put God first and treat others and love others with respect in the way you want to be treated. And I came to appreciate Jesus more through the path of Bhakti. And it was because of Krishna consciousness that I last year decided to kind of reread some of my Methodist literature. And I sent off for a book called In Their Own Words. And it was a book, someone in the UK had written it. It was a compilation of John Wesley and Charles Wesley's words that they'd written.
They've got some good ones.
And it was amazing.
Man,
I just loved it.
Some of our best prayers come from Wesley's personal journals.
Yeah.
Part of my journey into Krishna consciousness was actually 2 years of praying the Wesleyan Covenant prayer twice a day. Do you know that one?
Remind me.
I will tell you the version that I ended up praying. I changed about 4 words over time to be more inclusive. So like I gave I gave the Trinity slightly more generalized names. But let's see. I am no longer my own. I am yours. Make of me what you will. Rank me with who you will. Put me to doing. Put me to enduring. Let me be employed by you or laid aside for you. Exalted for you or brought low by you. Let me be full. Let me be empty. Let me have all things. Let me have nothing. I freely and wholeheartedly yield all things to your pleasure and disposal. And now, glorious and blessed God, my source, my sovereign, and my sustainer, I am yours and you are mine. So be it. And this covenant that I have made on earth, let it be ratified in the heaven of your presence.
Amen. That was wonderful. I have heard that before. Thank you for jogging my memory. It's been about 20 years, but okay. My next question is an interesting one, but they're all interesting ones, but particularly this one. What do the members of each of your religious traditions think about you being involved with the other? So what do the Methodists think about you being involved in Krishna consciousness and vice versa?
Well, in Krishna consciousness, I'm like 100% open um, about also being Methodist. And so far, everyone has just been like, it's ranged from curious with the hope that they can be excited to absolutely over the moon excited. Like just like especially when they're like, well, how is changing from one to the other? I'm like, no, this is not a changing thing, this is a converging thing, and then they're like, really, I had one person this summer um say that when she had been out, they'd gone out, oh, I'm blanking on the words right now, and this is just a my memory thing.
Don't worry
um
about it.
you go out and you chant in public.
Harinam, Harinam.
Harinam. See, I should know that. Yeah. And so they
I
were
know,
they
I
were
know it's
going out.
early in the morning where you are. Do not
Yeah.
worry. Do not worry at all.
No, it literally is just that like the Sanskrit category is a new one in my brain, and so I keep losing words from it. Um, but I also lose English a lot of the time too, so it's not just that. Um, um, but they were out on Harinam, and she came back, and she was raised in this tradition. She started out, she remembers being a preschooler in ISKCON temples, and then she spent her teen years serving in Navadvip um with our Guru Dev, whose name I also cannot, Govinda something.
Bhakti
I
Govinda
know the
Swami.
photo, but
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
just
yeah.
calls him Guru Dave, so I can never remember his name. Um, and and so she spent her teen years serving there, fairly closely. And so like this is like Krishna consciousness is all she's known, and she has a calling to the life, but she's struggling with serving because there are human beings involved. And human beings are difficult to deal with. Um, and uh, but she said when she was out on Harinam, she'd noticed a couple people standing off on the edges, and she said they reminded her of me. She thought maybe they were glowing a little bit. She's one of those people who like sees things, which I get. I have seen things I didn't want to see. I actually edited the Holy Spirit out of my memories for a time because I didn't want to be hallucinating. So it's my brain does interesting things. Should never leave it unsupervised. But um, but she said then she went up and she talked to the people, and and they said, yeah, well, we're Christians, and we're kind of interested in how you're worshiping. And she said that's when it hit her that what she saw in me was what a real Christian is, and that's what she was seeing in them. This is what a real Christian is. Um, and I'm like, wow, I glow to you? Cool. Like I would not expect that. I know myself too well. But I wouldn't I would say it's not me glowing, it's somebody glowing through me, even if there is a glow. So
Mm.
but
And what
yeah.
about what about
So
the
like
other
there's been
side?
so much
Mm.
on the other side, it's been
That
well
might be a
when
bit
I
more difficult, I imagine, with kind of the Methodist community. What do you think about your interest in
well,
Gaudiya Vaishnavism?
Christianity has an exclusivity problem because Christianity turned the idea of religion in the West from one of faith and development to one of belief and dogma. So there are a lot of people who think religion is all about what you believe. And so I'm not as, I'd say I'm like 95% open on the Methodist side.
But 95 is quite, I mean, 95% is
I
quite
was not
remarkable.
expecting to get there. I literally, when I first talked to my initiating guru, a couple years back, right after I told him, that I had a guru and he had been executed by the state 2,000 years beforehand for calling out religious leaders and being a public nuisance, which I thought was a pretty good way to like describe my own troublemaking nature. I said I intend to continue preaching the Bhakti of Christ until they kick me out. But at the time, I kind of expected I'd be kicked out by now. Like, but like I said, the concepts are so similar that I think it's actually helped my ministry, and I think people recognize that. Because I'm in Iowa, and there are very few devotees in Iowa, I don't think there are any temples here. I mean, there's a Hindu temple near here, but it's a general, not a Gaudiya Vaishnava specific. So I've been going out to California for a festival at the SCS Mott SoCal branch out there. And so I've been going out there every summer, and then also sometimes tacking on visits to my friends who are on the West Coast, because if you're going to travel halfway across a continent, you might as well see see everybody at the same time. You don't want to do that time shift more than you have to. Especially when you already wake up at 4 a.m. So when I go to California, I'm waking up at 2. And then everyone's like, "Oh, she's so devoted. She's always up for Mangal Arati." And I'm like, "No, dude, like, don't give me credit there. I'm also falling asleep waiting for evening prashad." I'm just like, this is just a time change thing. But that is a tangent. So going back to
Can I ask, what does your guru, well, your guru in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, what does he think about you being a Methodist lay minister?
He hasn't told me what he thinks, which I'm taking as a good sign. At one point in a Zoom, at some point, I'd asked a question and he said, "Well, it's interesting in your case because you kind of are a guru of a sort in your own right." And then he went on and answered it. And I don't remember what the question was or what the answer was, but I thought that recognition was embarrassing.
And just so everyone is aware, your Diksha guru in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition is Swami Avadhut, or Avadhut Swami, who I think has a very good social media presence. And he is a disciple of Govinda Maharaj, and Govinda Maharaj was the successor to Sridhar Maharaj. So that's the line that Madhurya Lila is in. Yes, Swami Avadhut on my long list of people I'd like to interview one day. So Swami Avadhut, if you're listening, maybe
good luck.
one day.
It took me 2 years just to get to the same place he was in.
He's very busy. I see him traveling all over the world, and he's attracting a lot of people to Krishna consciousness as well. And he's very inspiring. He has a lot of followers in Eastern Europe, in Russia. So good for you. Is that the right expression to use? I think it's great that you're following him. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of energy and enthusiasm.
It would not have been the logical choice.
No.
I had several logical choices ranked above him, and then it's like, nope, it's him.
Yeah. We've all been there. We've all been there. My story is always also quite interesting. Okay, you are in quite a unique position. I know I keep going on about that, but I think you are. There actually is only one other person that I know, and I have interviewed him about a year ago. He is a Gaudiya Vaishnava practitioner, and he's also a bishop in one of the offshoots of the Orthodox Church. It's not the Orthodox Church. There's an offshoot, apostolic something, and I've forgotten. And he wears all the cassock and the hat and everything. And yeah, I interviewed him a year ago. Fascinating individual. But one of the great things about you being in your unique position is that you can advise others, because there'll be other people that are struggling to pair up the tradition that they've come from and the tradition that they've discovered later on in life. And for some people, it's going to have a lot of kind of, mixed signals and messages in their head. What advice would you give to them?
You can't harmonize anything.
You can't
That's
harmonize anything.
people have come to me and said, I need you to tell me how you harmonize these concepts. And I'm like, I am not the one doing the harmonizing.
Mm. Mm.
These are eternal concepts that are wrapped up in cultural symbolism. And they are ordered, the practices are ordered for a particular culture, but also universally for the human nervous system. Because we are built, our bodies are made to help us on this process. So you can start by looking for commonalities, and you can ask for things to be harmonized. And in time, much of it has been for me.